So I think we'll start now. So this week, we're not actually gonna have like a really like in-depth lesson or anything like we have been the past couple weeks. I think to start off, we're gonna first talk about last week's like little challenge problem, the is palindrome problem. So if you guys haven't already, you guys should sign up at bit.ly/comsci which is also in the chat. And basically, if you have signed up, you can enter the contest using the same link. And then if you guys haven't looked at it already, the is palindrome problem basically just is the input format is an array containing the digits of a potential palindrome. That's a number. And then the variable number is the potential palindrome. And then you need to create some sort of program to output whether the number is a palindrome or the number isn't a palindrome. So first, basically, we're gonna look at like some theory-ish to like optimize our code. So in this example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is obviously a palindrome because it's the same forward and backwards. And there are 7 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so that means it's an odd palindrome. However, we only need to compare the first 3 digits and the last 3 digits because we don't actually care what the middle digit is or the 4. That digit could be anything, and it's still going to be a palindrome as long as the beginning and the end are both 1, 2, 3, and 3, 2, 1. So now that we know that, we only need to iterate through the loop 3 times because out of these 7 numbers, we only need to check 3 times 3 different pairs of digits. So in Java, when you divide like 2 integers that are odd and even, it actually doesn't like give you a decimal if they are integers, because if you remember or you should know, an integer doesn't include decimals basically. So in Java, 7 divided by 2 is not equal to 3.5. Instead, it's equal to 3, which actually works out for us. So we would just iterate a for loop through the amount of times the length of this number is divided by 2, which in our case is 7 divided by 2, which is actually 3. And then during your 3 iterations, we'll check the first number and the very last number, the second number and the second number from the back, and then the third and the third. So now we're going to look at the code in Java really quickly. So if you guys haven't checked out our GitHub already, we're posting like the answer code and like the solution programs in the GitHub. So if you navigate to lessons, and then that was week 4, and you can check out the files. So you can see in the solution code or the answer code or whatever, basically we have a Boolean, right, that we just called palindrome, and we set it to true in the beginning. And then we have a for loop that starts at integer I is equal to 0, right? And it iterates between temp.length divided by 2. So basically temp.length is the length of the array, or in our example earlier, it was the length of the array, which was 2. And then so we're going to iterate 3 times, for example, in our example, which was which had the 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then each iteration, we check if the digit a of I, right, which is the element number or the index number. So for example, if I was equal to 0, we would check if a of 0, which is the very first digit, is not equal to a of the length of the array, which is in our case would have been 7, subtracted by I, which is in this case is 0. So 7 minus 0 minus 1 is equal to 6. We have an extra -1 here, mainly because in our arrays are 0 index based. So they start at 0 and they end at length -1. So there is no index 7 in our example array earlier. Their index 6 is the max. And if this is not equal, which means the first digit is not equal to last digit, then the palindrome is false. So we set the palindrome the Boolean we created earlier to false. If each number is equal, then this condition will never actually loop. So palindrome will remain true. And then after we finish our for loop, we can create a simple if statement to check the results. So if palindrome, right, which basically means if palindrome is true, we'll print out the number, which was already built in, and then we'll give the phrase is a palindrome, and vice versa for if it's not a palindrome. So now Josh is going to explain the Python example.
So here is the Python example. It's very similar to the Java version. This is the input that's already given to you guys. And similar to Java, we set a flag to true. That's the Boolean that they use in Java. And once it turns false, it means that the program has detected that it is not a palindrome, and that's why it will turn false. So that's sort of like a flag checker. And over here, here you iterate through the entire array. So you don't have to implement the cutting the array in half if you don't want to, but it's obviously more efficient if you do. But if you don't want to, you could just iterate through the entire array, and that also works fine. Down here, you check whether index I is equal to index of negative I minus 1. So just going quick into this thing, let's say we have an array of four elements, A, B, C, D. Most of you are probably more familiar with the top one, where this is index 0, this is index 1, index 2, index 3. But in Python, you can also do negative index. So this will be negative index 1, negative index 2, negative index 3, negative index 4. So positive numbers go this positive numbers will increase from 0 upwards this way, and negative numbers will go from the last element and go backwards from negative 1. So that's why this one works. Yeah, and if it does not equal to, which is this little operator in the middle, then it will set flag to false, meaning that it has detected that it is no longer a palindrome. And at the end, you just output based on whether the program sees it as a palindrome or as not a palindrome.
So okay, so we have a little project for you guys, and so it's we're going to make a simple calculator. And how it's going to work is that for you're going to create a Java program or a Python program that can process a some given input and produce some output. And this is basically, and it will like it'll be able to do additions, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So how it's gonna work is that in the first line so in the first line you'll see a number that represents how many lines will come after it. So in this case it's 2, so there are 2 lines after it. And for each of these 2 lines, if it, there are 2 possibilities. One possibility is that you have a you have a number on the left, and then an operator, and then a number on the right. And in this case, you just do the operations like specified by the symbol, the operator. So 1 plus 1, and that gives you 2. And we expect it to be so we expect it to have a decimal point and a 0 if it's an integer. And so just use doubles or floats. And if you don't understand what that means, we'll explain it later. And there's a so that's one case. And for the other possibility, you can also have only an operator and the right operand. So if you don't have the number on the left, you're going to use the last calculation as the number on the left. So in this case, the last number, the result from the last calculation is 2. So we'll do 2 plus 5, and it gives you 7. And that's basically it. And now we'll give it to we'll explain some concepts that you need to know to do this effectively.
So I'll just quickly like explain some stuff that you probably are going to need to know in Java. So so as you can see from the simple calculator, basically I'm gonna like in a nutshell, I'm gonna like give some like little tips and starting code, and then if you guys still need more help later, you guys can ask us. And if right now you feel confident that you can like solve this by yourself, probably would recommend you to just start off just and give it a shot. um, so the first thing we want to be able to do is we want to like store an answer. So we're going to create a variable, and in Java we're going to use a double because we want it to be able to store a decimal. So we're going to have double answers equal to 0.0. And then we're also going to have a for loop. So integer n, which is given to you already, is the very first integer, like for example 2 right here. So it tells you how many more lines of like input is there. So we're gonna loop through all of these lines. So I equals 0, I is less than n, I plus plus. And then most of you guys might not have used a scanner before. If you guys have, that's great. So in our scenario right now, scanner is called in. So we're gonna create a string that takes in the whole input line. So string line is equal to in dot next line. What this basically does is it just reads a whole line. So for example, it will read the whole line of 1 plus 1. And then we want to split our line based off the spaces. So we're going to do string split, and we're going to actually make this an array. So this is a string array called split, which is equal to line dot split. And then line dot split in the parentheses, you need to pass arguments of what you wanted to split on. So we want it to split every time it sees an empty space. So for example, in 1 plus 1, it will split right here because there's a space, and I'll split right here because there's a space. And then basically what this gives you is it gives you an array of length whatever, depending on how many like chunks there are of like each character or string of whatever is before or after. So now the last thing I'm going to show is you want to create an if statement. So if split array, right? If split dot length is equal to 3, which means if there are 3 options here, as you can see, there are 3 here. This one only has 2, of course. So if it is equal to 3, then we know that we have 2 numbers. So our first number, double first, is equal to double dot parse double split 0. So this might be a bit confusing, but basically what we're doing is we created a double with the name of first, right? Because it's our first number. And then double dot parse double, what it does, it converts whatever's in this parentheses to a double. So right now what's in our parentheses is the very first element of our array, which would have been 1. So now I'll just print this out just to show you how it works. So, and now if we run our code, we should get an output of like, and we get an output of 1.0 because that is the very first element in our array 1 plus 1. And that's basically all the code we're going to give you to help off, to start off for Java. And I think Lucas is going to do like the same in Python.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna show you pretty much the exact same thing Eric did, but it's gonna be in Python. Okay, so you wanna start out, it's gonna be mostly the same thing, but there's gonna be some syntax differences. Um, So you start out by taking the input. We don't have to import anything in Python because the input is built in. And then I want to initiate a float, and I'm gonna name that answer. And then I'm gonna do the same thing that Eric did in Java, which is make a for loop. So this should be pretty self-explanatory. Just n is gonna be my number of lines, because I took input on that, so that's why it's in range n. So for every line, I want to take a new input. So that's what a is going to be. And we're also going to use the split function, but this time for Python. And what this is going to do is it will make a list, basically with each of the elements, and it's going to separate by using the spaces. So that's why I have a space in here. So every time it like sees a space, it's basically going to like split. So I'm gonna just go one more line. So here you have the list set up. All you have to do now is you want to make two if statements. One of them, if it's like 1 plus 1. So one of them would be if the length of A is equal to 3, then you do something. And the other if statement would be if the length is equal to 2. So I'll just complete this if statement. So you would want to make two more variables. That's going to be the first number and the second number. So I'm going to name it first and second. And then you're going to you're going to just do the operation in the middle. So I'm going to let you guys do that. So I'm just going to give you guys this much code to start up.
I think let's open breakout rooms right now. So I think we're gonna open two breakout rooms. So the first one, in breakout room 1, you guys can join that if you feel like you want some more help, and you like don't understand something, and you want us to like explain a bit more, or like go over the problem in depth, or like maybe explain some past problems that you guys might have looked at this week. And in breakout room 2, basically is for anyone who feels like they're pretty confident in finishing this problem and they just want to try it themselves. And you can like talk with the other people in there, or like the other officers in there, and ask them for help if you need it. And but if you want to like follow along and learn, you can probably join breakout room 1. So I'm going to open breakout rooms, and you guys should be able to choose which breakout room you want to join with the breakout room option at the bottom. However, if you don't see that, which is okay, just message me directly in the chat and I'll manually add you to whichever room. So remember, breakout room 1 is if you want to learn a bit more, follow along a bit more in depth. And breakout room 2 is you want to like do it more by yourself a bit and just attempt the problem. Remember, if you guys don't have the option, just message me directly in the chat. Yeah, Eric, just message me. You want to join breakout room 1 or 2? Hello, Calvin and Devin. Which breakout room would you guys like to join? So what's happening? Hello.
I'm letting everyone try it on their own until 1, and then I'm gonna go over the answer.
Wait, no, just start going over it now because this is breakout room 1.
Okay. All right, sure.
Wait, first, question to you guys. Do you guys want us to just like explain like the answer and like the code, or do you guys want us to like are you guys like confused on the question or like the code we showed earlier, or what do you guys want us to explain basically? Or do you guys just have no preference? The link to the page isn't working anymore. What link are you trying to use? Um, okay. Peter, can you try using that link first? You have to sign up for the contest first before you can view the problems. So that might be it. I think Lucas, I'm gonna start first and explain a bit of the Java code that we just showed, and then like explain a bit more on what to do later on. And then you can do the same for Python, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so also like there's not a lot of us in here right now, so if you guys just like have any questions, feel free to like interrupt us or whatever. So basically more in depth, I hope you guys should be able to see this. So these are just all import statements. You guys do not need to worry about this. Just totally ignore it basically. And then this is where our class starts. This is our like default line. This is also our default line. And this is where our code basically starts. So scanner in equals new scanner system.in. A rough explanation is just this is a scanner class. It's an object that basically can read input from the system. So the system.in, you guys don't need to worry about this really either. And an integer int n equals integer dot parse in that next line. Once again, you guys don't have to worry about this. This is all default code. Basically, what this means is integer n is simply equal to this integer over here 2, right? And what integer n or n does is it tells us how many more lines of code do we have. So our computer or our program reads reads that there's 2, right? And then after that, it knows that there's only 2 more lines of code. So we only need to loop through 2 more times to evaluate 2 more different expressions. So I think you guys understand what double answer is. This is basically our answer. We're going to store our answer in this variable later on. And now the for loop. So the for loop basically in I equals 0, I is less than n, I plus plus. All this does is it iterates n times, right? So it iterates however n many times n is. So currently n is equal to the first line, or n is equal to 2. So it loops through 2 times because this is n is equal to 2. And each time we loop, what we want to do is we want to grab all of the code here, we want to grab this input. We want to split it into chunks, right? So for example, we want to split this into chunks of the number 1, the operand plus, and then the number 1. And then the next time we want to split this into 2 chunks. The first chunk would just be the operand plus, and the second chunk would be the number 5. So to split it into chunks, what we're doing is we create a string variable, which is called line, and it grabs the next line, right? So right here, I'm going to do system.out.println line. So if we run this code, you'll see it displays what the variable line is. So line is 1 plus 1. That's what line is. And then now that we know what line is, we want to split it into our 3 chunks, right? So string split equals line.split and then space. So basically what this means is we're creating a new array. This is the brackets here symbolize that this is an array. So split is an array, a string array to be specific. And we're going to pass in the arguments line.split and then space. So what line.split does is it takes whatever the string is here, so which is 1 plus 1, and it splits it based off our parameter. Our parameter currently is literally just a blank space, right? So our blank space, it checks that this is a space right here, so it splits right there, and this is also a space, so it splits right there. So what it does, it gives us the output of 3 different chunks. So for example, I can loop through for int I equals 0, I is less than split dot length, I plus plus. This is just example, just to like show what it actually is. So this code that I just wrote right here, this for loop, basically it just loops through. You can't have I over here because we already called I here. That'd be a duplicate variable, so it doesn't work. So we're just gonna replace it with J. Basically what we're showing is that it's gonna print out 1, 1, 1. Okay, that was also supposed to be a J, my bad. So now it should print out 1 plus then 1. And that's because in our example above, we split it into 3 different chunks. And the first chunk contains the first thing before the space, then there's a plus sign, then the last thing before the space. So hopefully that makes sense. And then just really quickly before I hand it off to Lucas, the rest of this code is this if statement checks if split.length is equal to 3. If it is equal to 3, we know that there are 3 different objects and it's 1 plus 1, something like this. If it isn't equal to 3, then we have to do something else because we know it only says plus 5. And if it is equal to 3, we want to grab the number. So double first equals double.parse double. Remember, double.parse double just converts this into a double. So for example, split 0 gets converted to a double. And when we print out first, it prints out whatever this is, which is 1.0. There's a 0.0 because this is called a double. All right, so yeah, that's a good question. So integer versus double Java. So I'll just quickly explain this. Hopefully there's a good image. All right, so this is pretty good. So an int, these are types, right? So this is an integer type, and the name could be whatever we want to call it. So for our example earlier, we called it first. You can call it number, sum, a, b, whatever. And then value, as you can see, integer, all of these have no decimal points. 1, 500, 500, no decimal points. In the double, there are decimal points. 5.5, 95.0334, they do have decimal points. So that's the main difference between an integer and a double. Yeah, basically you can view it as a float. In Java, we call it a double. Does anyone have any other questions, or Lucas will start like explaining the same in Python-ish?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do the same in Python. So we don't have to input anything or type any like weird stuff before the code. We could just start with our code. So n equals in input, that just takes an integer as the input, and then answer equals 0.0. That just initializes answer as a decimal, or they call it a float. So for I in range n, this is how you do a for loop in Python. You want to have any variable. It doesn't have to be I, it could be any letter, but I is good because it doesn't really stand for anything else. And then n comes from over here. So we're gonna have the same number of times we run through this for loop as we have in integer inputs. So in our for loop, we're gonna take an input for a, and then we're gonna change a, and we're gonna split it. So this is like the same thing. It splits whenever there's a space. So now we have a list that has these 3 or 2. It could be 3 or 2, but it has these different characters. So now we want to first check if it's the 3 case or the 2 case. So if it is the 3 case, then what we could do is that we know that the first one is a number and the third one is a number. So we can say first, and then I'm gonna use float because the question tells us to use float. And then this is how you access a variable in Python. You want to do brackets. So this basically pulls the third number and puts it in first. So I'm gonna do the same. I'm just gonna copy and paste, but this time I'm gonna name it second. And oops, this is supposed to be 0 because first I'm pulling the first number and then second I'm pulling the third number. So now we have these two. All we have to do is we do 4 if statements. We check if it's plus, we check the middle character, and we check if it's plus, minus, multiply, or divide. So in this case, if it is plus, then all we have to do is answer is equal to our first plus our second. So you basically have, want to do the same thing for all 4 statements. I was gonna call on someone for this, but I don't think we have time for that. So I'll just do this. You're gonna copy and paste. Oops. And then all you're gonna do is change the variable signs. Okay, so that deals with everything in the 3 variable or 3 character case. And then you just have to do, it's pretty much the same thing for the 2 character. You want to check that it's 2, and then you want to set the second character. So that's going to be 1 because it goes 0, 1. You want to set the second character to be a float, and then you do the same for if statements. And don't forget
Wait,
to
sorry to
print.
interrupt.
Yeah.
Just really quickly. It's 1:10 right now, so if anyone does need to leave, feel free to leave. I think we're gonna just stay in here for a couple more minutes because to finish explaining, really quickly, and also to just add on to what Lucas is saying, that would be basically the same like formatting slash theory in Java. We would also do the same thing. Check if the middle operand is equal to a plus, a minus, whatever sign it is. And last thing to note is if the length of split or whatever array you're calling it is equal to 2, right? So Lucas, can you scroll up really quickly? Right, so as you can see, plus 5, there isn't a first number to add 5 onto. So what you're going to need to do, it shouldn't be too hard, is you're going to have to create a variable to store a temporary value of 1 plus 1. So in an example, you're going to have to create a variable to store a temporary value, which will store 1 plus 1, which is equal to 2. And then when you notice that it says plus 5 and it doesn't have anything in front of the plus sign, you have to grab that temporary value, which is equal to 2, and then add the 5 onto it to get 7. If you guys don't understand that or have more questions, you can ask us after we're done right now. Which, by the way, Lucas, are you done or do you want to keep explaining?
I think that's fine. The rest should be pretty easy, but if you want to stay, I could type the rest of the
Yeah,
code for you guys.
basically, we're gonna close the rooms now. So everyone who hasn't left yet to go to tutorial, whatever, we're gonna all meet back in the main room, answer any questions you guys might have, and the meeting's basically over. If you guys want to leave, that's totally fine. So now you guys can all head back to the main room. Oh wait, I see a question.
Okay. So len a equals is equal to 3. That basically checks that it has 3 characters. So and then we go to the and then we go check like the second character if it's like plus, minus, multiply, or divide. I think we leave
Yeah.
this breakout room.
I'm gonna close the breakout rooms. If you guys still have more questions, just join the main room and we'll answer it. Okay, so we're done with the breakout rooms because it's past 1:10 and the meeting's basically over. So if you guys want to leave or need to leave, you guys can. However, if you guys have more questions or you want to ask us something more in depth or you want us to go over something more, we'll be here for a bit longer and we can help explain. Otherwise, see you guys next week at the same time.